Hi, everyone. Welcome back to tonight's podcast where we are discussing active listening that transforms, where we grow in the grace of communication that heals and connects and honors God. It's been a little while and a few weeks actually, so I wanted to make sure that we were connecting. And so I'm so glad that we are able to join one another tonight. So I am Shirley Farrar, and this is Encouragement on Fire. And this actually is our number 3 of the active listening. And in our first 2 episodes, we talked about building a foundation of presence, and 2, how posture communicates that you care. So today we're going to go a little deeper beyond what is said and to what is felt. Yes, you heard me. Beyond what is said to what is felt. This episode is called Listening Beyond Words. And because great listeners don't just hear sentences, what do we hear? We hear hearts. How many of you, when you're communicating with someone else, you're hearing their heart? So, part 1 of today, we want to talk about how words are only half of the message. So, I want you to think about the last time someone said, "I'm fine." Hmm. Now, depending on how they said it, that phrase could mean a few things. So, let's look at "I'm genuinely okay." Perhaps that's what they meant. Or "I'm hurt, but don't want to talk about it." Or it could be, "You should probably ask me that question again." So tone, pace, and how emotion carries much information as words. So sometimes it's even more so. You say, "How is that, Charlotte?" Okay. So active listening means tuning into a deeper layer of conversation. So it means paying attention to how someone is saying something or how something is said, and not just what is said. I know stay with me. So part 2 of that is tone, pace, and emotion. So let's break it down. Hmm. So tone tells you attitude, right? So a flat tone might mean exhaustion, like, or indifference. A sharp tone, which many of us do, might reveal frustration or, guess what, even fear. So we move into pace. Pace tells us like the energy level. So when someone speaks quickly, which I do that a lot, they may be anxious or even excited, more so excited for me. When they slow down, they might be sad or, like me, in a reflective state. Make sure you're focusing on the emotion, because emotion comes through sometimes sighs, pauses, and the little things between the sentences. I'm learning how to pause in my conversation. I'm learning how even to sigh. Mine may sound a little different to someone else's, but I'm learning. So the next time you're in a conversation, I want you to imagine like you're a detective. I know, right? Or just the detective of compassion. How about that? Sounds better. All right. So don't just collect facts. We tend to do that. Okay, this means this means this means listen for feelings. The feelings that are hiding underneath the sentences. Hmm. So, third, I would say listening for feelings, not just facts. So, here's the key: people are rarely saying exactly what they feel. How many of us, and I don't want to stereotype, but how many of us women say exactly what we feel? Maybe more of you do, but I don't always do that. So maybe I should say me. So sometimes many tend to hint or even imply, and sometimes we soften up. We just, Someone says, work's been busy, but maybe what they really mean is, I feel overwhelmed and unseen. Perhaps a teenager might say to you, if you have teenagers, whatever, but underneath, they could be embarrassed, and often there's some fear. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, how about we listen in between the words? When you learn to listen for feelings, you begin to connect at the heart level. And that's when healing, empathy, and true understanding can happen. Part four: empathy versus sympathy. We get those mixed up, don't we? Well, let's talk about empathy versus sympathy. They sound alike, but they live in different worlds. Sympathy stands on the shore and says, listen to what I'm saying. It says, I see your storm from here. I'm so sorry it's raining over there. Hmm. But empathy, it's almost like a ride or die. It steps into the boat and says, I feel the wind too, and you're not alone. How many of you are those people? So, empathy doesn't require you, however, to fix the situation or someone. It just requires you to feel with them. That's what I think a lot of us want. Not someone to fix us, but just to feel with us wherever we find ourselves. So, you know the story of Jesus and Lazarus. Jesus modeled empathy perfectly, and he wept at Lazarus's tomb. You all know this story. Even though he knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead. Remember, he knew what he was going to do, but he still was in the moment. How many of you are in the moment when someone tells you something that hurts them? Hmm. You know, Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he entered the pain before he brought the miracle. We can do that. We can be those people to our persons. So, for Jesus, that was divine empathy. How many of us want to be Christ like? We want to walk like Jesus. Can we do that? When someone is explaining to us how they feel and just being present, not on our phones, not taking text, not seeing what's going on around us, but actually being present, listening to someone and not getting distracted. So, part five, there's a scripture reflection, and it is Romans 12:15, and it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. If we could only capture that and be present. So it's one short verse, but it captures the heart of listening beyond words. When someone rejoices, we join their joy. When they mourn, we share in their tears. A lot of times, we don't want to share in people's tears. We just wanted them to move on, or we just want it to go away. But does that mean that we don't care? So we ought to be empathetic because the Bible tells us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I would hope in my situation, in the middle of whatever I'm going through, that someone would be empathetic to sit long enough with me and to share my story. So, listening beyond words is an act of love. It says, your emotions matter to me because you matter to me. And part 6 is a reflective statement. It's one of the best ways to show empathy is through reflective statements. These are small, gentle phrases that mirror what you've heard. I'll give you an example. It sounds like you're feeling discouraged. How many of you said that to someone? I can tell the situation really excites you. Or maybe it seems like that moment caught you off guard. You're not judging, you're not analyzing, you're reflecting. And it lets the other person know that you're paying attention. You're paying attention to more than just the words that are coming out of their mouth. Reflective listening, it builds trust. It says, I see your feelings, not just your facts. And then number 7, it's like an everyday example. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine a friend says, I'm just tired of trying. I hope I never hear friends say that. Sometimes that does happen. Now, you could respond with sympathy. Yeah, that sounds rough. Or you could respond with a little advice. You might need a vacation. How many of us have said that? But an empathetic, reflective listener might say, it sounds like you're exhausted and you're starting to lose hope. I wish that I was that deep, that I could say all those things in the right moment at the right time. That kind of response opens space for honesty, and they might take a deep breath and say, yeah, that's exactly it. And in that moment, healing begins not because you solved their problems, but because you heard their problems. And often that's all someone really wants you to do, is to hear them. So number 8 is a practical exercise. And for this week, here's your practical exercise. So first thing, choose one conversation to listen to intently. You think you can do that? I know you can. The second thing is, as you listen, I want you to identify at least one unspoken emotion behind the person's words. And then number 3, gently reflect it back using a phrase like, it sounds like you're feeling, or I sense that this situation made you feel. You might be surprised at how quickly the walls come down between you and that other person. And then I would say number 9, I want you to do a word of encouragement. God listens to you this way. He gives encouragement. He doesn't just hear your prayers, which we are to pray. Men are to always to pray and never to faint. See, when you're in your prayers, God hears your heart. And in Psalms 34:18, it says, He is close to the brokenhearted. So when we listen beyond words, when we listen beyond words, we're imitating the very heart of God, a heart that hears the whisper beneath the words, the sigh behind the sentences, the tear that never gets spoken. So the next time someone talks to you this week, don't rush to respond. Pause, tune in, and ask yourself, what are they really saying between the lines? That's where the connection is going to happen. So I want to say thank you for spending this time discussing listening that transforms. And remember, listening is more than a skill, it's a ministry. When you learn to hear beyond words, you become a vessel of comfort, compassion, and peace. So join me next time for episode number 4, The Power of Questions, where we're going to learn how thoughtful questions can open the heart and deepen understanding. Until then, keep listening, not just with your ears, but with your spirit. I'm Shirley Farrar, and this has been Encouragement on Fire. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.